My perception is my reality. It's pretty comforting, I guess. A lot of people find comfort in that belief. And for a long time, so did I. I used to cling to that belief, thinking that my point of view was the only one that really mattered. But what if I told you that that lazy, self-indulgent belief was holding me back? That it was limiting my ability to really connect with other people? Well, today I'd like to challenge that belief and share with you a powerful story about 8 intense hours in a hospital room that taught me the profound difference between perception and perspective. As you heard, I've been a respiratory therapist for 28 years. And for many of those years, I thought I had it all figured out. Clock in, do my job, clock out, go home. Simple. Well, as it turns out, it's not that simple. And it took a life-changing event for me to realize just how wrong I was in that belief. It was 1998, just another night shift in the hospital for me, when I was called up to labor and delivery for an emergency C-section. So I rushed upstairs, headed into the OR room, thinking to myself, this is just something else to check off my to-do list. I had no idea that the next 8 hours were going to completely redefine me, both personally and professionally. The baby was born, and he was a beautiful baby boy. But something was wrong with him. His oxygen levels kept falling. We ended up having to intubate him, place him on mechanical ventilation, and we even called in a team of neonatal specialists from a nearby children's hospital. We tried everything we knew, but no matter what we did, nothing seemed to work. Hour after agonizing hour, we were forced to watch as this tiny life slipped away, and we were powerless to stop it. Now, I'd seen death before. In my line of work, it's an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with way more often than we'd like. But this was different. This was a newborn, full of potential, with parents waiting just outside the room for us to save their child. And I'd never seen a newborn die before. So I was crushed at our inability to save him. Without warning, a wave of emotions that I couldn't control washed over me. And for the first time in my career, in that moment, I felt utterly, devastatingly human. And then as I stood 15 feet away from grieving parents who were holding their child for what would be the first and last time, I had a realization. This wasn't just a patient. What I do isn't just a job. I deal with life, precious, irreplaceable life, and I have been treating it like some task to be completed. Needless to say, I was ashamed at the way that I had approached my job. My perception had been challenged. And then came the moment that completely shattered my idea of perception. The family's pastor came in to pray with them. And the moment he walked in, I recognized him. He was my pastor. Although I didn't know them, this family went to my church. Suddenly, all the lines between personal and professional completely blurred. My compartmentalized little life I thought I had crumbled right before my eyes. How was I going to reconcile our inability to save this child with my role in our shared community? How was I ever going to face them? Not if, but when I eventually ran into them. Well, in that moment, something inside me shifted fundamentally. It happened immediately, but it took me years to really pinpoint it and put a name to it. I eventually understood that my problem had been my perception. I realized that my perception, my subjective, limited view of my job and the world around me was woefully inadequate. I needed something more. What I needed was perspective. You see, while perception and perspective are very closely related, and they both help us interpret and understand our view of the world around us, they have crucial differences. Perception is the interpretation part of that equation. It's a sensory response to what we see, what we hear, the way that we grew up, our past experiences. All of these things culminate to what we call perception, which is that initial interpretation of something. But what perception isn't necessarily is the truth. I mean, it might be our truth, but our truth can be skewed by all those things. But perspective is the true understanding of the relative importance of those things. Perspective determines how we interpret through perception. It's more about stepping outside of ourselves, pushing perception to the side, and seeing something for what it really is. When we do that, when we gain perspective, our perception begins to change. Simply put, perception is our interpretation of a situation, while perspective is our viewpoint on it. But our point of view can change. Usually this happens over time, but sometimes it happens in an instant, like it did with me that night. When we interact with others, we have to understand that our perception doesn't change their reality. But if we gain perspective, that can help us understand and interact with that reality. Think about it. How often do we judge situations based solely on our perception, without even considering someone else's perspective? How many times do we make snap judgments based on our personal experiences without considering what someone else might be going through? How often then do we miss the opportunity to truly connect because we're trapped in our own limited viewpoint? Well, that wasn't going to be me anymore. I couldn't be that person anymore. From that night on, every patient was a family member. And these days, every interaction I have, both in and out of work, is an opportunity to connect, to gain perspective, and to make a real difference. Not just in myself, but in everyone around me. And the child that taught me this valuable lesson, his name was Tori. And Tori's parents invited the hospital staff to his funeral, but I couldn't find the strength to go. I was so bothered by everything that had happened, and this nagging thought that maybe there was more we could have done to save him, that I couldn't face them. But I still needed an outlet. So I turned to poetry. And I wrote a poem about Tori and how his short little life changed mine forever. And it took me a few weeks, but I eventually worked up the courage to approach Tori's parents at church, to finally give my condolences, but to now give them this poem that I had written. And about a week after that, they gave me back a bookmark for my Bible. And at the top of that bookmark is a picture of Tori. And beneath that is the poem that I wrote. Tori's short life changed mine forever. In 8 short hours, Tori taught me that being bold in our convictions doesn't mean that we can't also be vulnerable and empathetic. He taught me that by using perspective to shape our understanding, rather than relying on mere perception, we can change not just our lives, but the lives of those around us. Because when we harness that power of perspective, the word perception takes on a whole new meaning. That's the power of perspective. It's not about abandoning our views and experiences. It's about expanding them. And it's about recognizing that perception is one small piece in a much larger puzzle. This shift in perspective didn't just make me a better respiratory therapist. Over the years, it's made me a better person. And Tori's the reason that I later became a neonatal respiratory therapist. I needed to do better. I wanted to do more. So the question then is, how do we cultivate this perspective shift into our daily lives? Well, it starts with curiosity. Instead of making assumptions, ask questions. Seek to understand before being understood. Listen. Truly listen to what others are saying. It also requires humility. We need to be willing to admit that our initial perceptions might be completely wrong. And we need to be open to new ideas, new experiences, new ways of looking at things. But perhaps what it requires most of all is empathy. We need to make that conscious effort to step outside of ourselves, put ourselves in someone else's shoes, try to understand and recognize what battles they might be fighting, what hopes and fears they might have. It's not always easy. Our perceptions are deeply ingrained, and they're shaped by years of experiences. Changing them can be difficult, even painful sometimes. But the rewards, I promise you, are immeasurable. In my case, my experience with Tori forced me to confront the limitations of my perception. He showed me that my job wasn't just about completing tasks or following procedure. It's about connecting. Connecting with people during some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives and recognizing the humanity in every single person. When we harness that power of perspective in our lives, we open up a world of possibilities. We become better problem solvers, better communicators, better leaders. We build stronger relationships and more cohesive communities. And we become agents of positive change in a world that, let's face it, desperately needs it. So take a lesson from Tori. Change your perception by gaining perspective. Use perspective to help you grow. Recognize those battles that others might be fighting. And set an example, not just for yourself, but for everyone that you encounter, that they might recognize the power of perspective in their lives. And so, I'll leave you with a challenge today. As you leave here, be bold in your convictions, but be open to new perspectives. Be strong in your beliefs, but be willing to listen and learn. Be true to yourself, but always be empathetic to others. Because when we do this, when we harness that power of perspective in our lives, we don't just change the way we see the world, we change the world itself. And we, each and every one of us, has the power through perspective to make the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, and a whole lot more understanding.